Hey, what's up, you guys? It's happening. Crime and Punishment, Part 1, Chapter 6, I believe, by Dostoevsky. I got a comment asking if I was a dude, and the answer to that is no. I was born a female. I experienced all the biological processes that a female typically experiences, unfortunately. And to you, my friend, I will give you this SpongeBob fruit roll-up meme edition. That's right, folks. It says meme edition on the thing. 1 second, me and the besties later. Oh, I hate their fake asses. 5 seconds later, me and the besties. So, oh my god, he's holding the pansexual flag. Good for him. Anyway, guys, we are doing it. But yeah, bottom line, I am a woman. And I do sometimes question my gender, but it's not like a serious thing. It's more so, I think, just parts of growing up and not knowing just the whole culture around gender. And I think it's actually okay and it's normal for anyone to question their gender just because of the way, because gender is an expression, right? It's an expression and everyone experiences it in their own unique way, right? So, I don't know. I'm not a guy. Sometimes I feel like I am one. But I think that's like not like a me being delusional thing. I think it's just everyone experiences gender their own unique way. But if you're wondering if I have a dick, I don't. Sometimes I wish I did, but I don't. Anyway. We're reading this now. I should have gone to the page. Okay. Afterward, Raskolnikov happened to find out why the peddler and his wife had actually invited Lizaveta to come see them. It was the most ordinary business matter, and there was nothing special about it. A family newly arrived in St. Petersburg and impoverished was selling off its women's clothes. Since they would get little for them in the market, they were looking for a middleman, and Lizaveta was engaged in this kind of work. She dealt in second-hand clothes on commission, and she had a large clientele, since she was quite honest and always set the best price, and whatever price was set, she stuck to it. As a rule, she did not talk much, and was already mentioned quite meek and timid. Recently, however, why am I stumbling on my words? Maybe that comment got to me, you know? Maybe that comment got to me. Maybe it's because I have a low voice and I look like a dude. I don't know. Because, like, I feel like especially, like, in college, right? I try to, when I'm going to, like, parties and stuff, I try to exert this sort of, like, I over-feminize myself, right? But, like, naturally, I'm not a very feminine person. I don't like wearing feminine clothes. Like, it's fun, and it's, like, more performative when I, like, wear a lot of makeup and put on, like, cute clothes and stuff, and, like, feminine clothes. It's more of a performative thing of, like, my own gender, right? Like, the way that, like, drag queens do it, right? So, like, especially, I do sometimes like to put on a very hyper feminine sort of like image sometimes, but most of the times I would say I'm more like tomboyish. But again, like, it doesn't matter. And yeah, I've never exuded a purposefully masculine, right? Like, I've never done that on purpose. I think it just comes naturally. So maybe I am a dude. Dog, you got me questioning my gender, bro. That's not cool. Actually, it is cool because everyone needs to have a conversation with themselves and think to themselves and say, am I happy in the way that I'm expressing myself? Am I happy? And am I taking care of myself? Am I expressing myself the way that I want to express myself? Gender-wise or fashion-wise or even just, whatever-wise. And if you're in a part of self-care is making sure that you feel comfortable in your own skin, right? So, and gender identity is a part of that. So, the comments assuming that I'm a dude, right? I wouldn't say if it makes me uncomfortable, but it does make me look inward and it makes me think, okay, well, like, what the hell? Like, it actually did make me think about, like, the way that I do actually dress and, like, the way that I present myself. Like, literally, In college, for whatever reason, all my friends thought I was a lesbian until I introduced them to my boyfriend. And, like, I am bisexual, right? So, like, I don't really care. But it's just weird to, like, know that sort of stuff. Anyway, recently, however, Raskolnikov had grown superstitious. Traces of superstition remained in him for a long time afterward, too, and he was always inclined to see a certain strangeness, a mystery, in the whole affair. He assumed the working of special influences and coincidences. The previous winter, a student he knew named Pokarev, about to leave for Kharkov, had somehow, in the course of a conversation, given him Iona Ivanova's address, just in case he might have to pawn something. For a long time he did not go see her. He was working at giving lessons, and somehow he managed. 6 weeks ago he had remembered the address. He had 2 things that were suitable for pawning: his father's old silver watch and a gold ring with 3 small red stones, given him as a keepsake when he said goodbye to his sister. He decided to pawn the ring. When he saw the old woman for the very first time, before he knew anything special about her, he conceived for her an insurmountable disgust. She gave him 2 paper rubles. On the way home he dropped in at a nasty little restaurant, ordered tea, sat down, and fell to brooding. As a chick scratches his way out of the egg, a strange thought was scratching its way into his conscious mind. It fascinated him. Almost next to him at another table sat a student he did not know at all and a young officer. They had been playing billiards and had stopped for some tea. Suddenly he heard the student telling the officer about the pawnbroker woman, Iona Ivanova, and was giving him her address. This already seemed a bit strange to Raskolnikov. He had just come from there, and here they were talking about her. It was, of course, a coincidence, but he could not free himself somehow from a decidedly peculiar impression, as though someone were catering to his inmost wish. Then the student began to communicate various details about this Iona Ivanova to his companion. "She's quite a girl," he said. "Rich as a Jew. She's always got money around. She could lend out 5,000 just like that, yet she wouldn't turn down a pawn worth a ruble. A lot of our guys have been to her, only she's a terrible skinflint." He began telling how capricious and bad-tempered she was, how one only had to be a day late in redeeming a pawn and the thing was gone, and she would only give a quarter of what anything was worth, charging interest of 5 to 7% a month, and so forth. The student chattered away. He mentioned that the old woman had a sister, Lizaveta, and though the old woman was only a shrunken little hag, she beat her sister, holding her virtually in thrall, as though she were a small child, whereas this Lizaveta was actually at least 6 feet tall. "There's another phenomenon for you," the student exclaimed, and laughed. They started talking about Lizaveta. The student talked about her with a certain special pleasure, laughing frequently, and the officer listened to him with great interest and asked the student to send this Lizaveta to him to mend his linen. Raskolnikov, who did not miss a single word, learned everything at one stroke. Lizaveta was the old woman's younger stepsister. They had different mothers, and she was 35 years old. She worked for her sister day and night, and served at home in place of a cook and laundress. In addition, she mended and hired herself out to wash floors. Everything she earned she gave to her sister. She did not dare accept an order or any kind of work without her sister's permission. The old woman had already made out her will, the contents of which were well known to Lizaveta, who received nothing from it except a few chairs and things like that. The money was all going to a particular monastery in Novgorod province for eternal remembrance of the old woman's soul. Lizaveta was of lower social status than her sister, who had married into the civil service class. She was unmarried, terribly uncouth, remarkably tall, with big splay feet, always in battered goatskin shoes. Honestly, me girl showing up to the farmer's market. And she kept herself very clean. What really surprised the student and made him laugh was that Lizaveta was always pregnant. "But you say she's a freak," the officer remarked. "Well, she's a bit dark, and she looks like a soldier in disguise. But, she isn't really a freak. Her face and eyes are rather kind. Yes, very much so. Proof is, there are lots who like her. She's very quiet, very meek, very timid and agreeable to everything, and she has a very sweet smile." "You like her too, do you?" the officer laughed. For her strangeness. I tell you what, though," the student added heatedly, "I could rob and murder that damned old woman, and I assure you I won't have a twinge of conscience." The officer laughed again, but Raskolnikov shuddered. How strange it was. "If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a serious question," the student continued warmly. "Of course I was kidding, but look. On the one hand, we have a stupid, senseless, insignificant, bad-tempered, sick old hag, needed by no one and harmful to all. She herself does not know what she is living for, and she might as easily die tomorrow of natural causes. Do you see what I mean?" "I see what you mean," replied the officer, watching his excited companion attentively. "Well, listen, on the other hand, we have a fresh young We have fresh young elements going under with no help. By the thousands, everywhere. This old woman's money, which is going to be sequestered in a monastery, could beget 1,000 good deeds and fresh starts. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives could be put on the right path. Dozens of families rescued from poverty, from ruin, from collapse, from decay, from the venerable wards of the hospital. All this with her money. Kill her, take her money dedicated to serving mankind, to the general welfare. Well, what do you think? Isn't this petty little crime effaced by thousands of good deeds? For one life, thousands of lives saved from ruin and collapse. One death and 100 lives. There's arithmetic for you. What does the life of this sickly, stupid, bad-tempered old woman mean anyway in the balance of existence? No more than the life of a louse or cockroach. Not that much, because the old woman actually does harm. She eats up other people's lives. The other day, she bit Lisavetta's finger in a fit of temper. It almost had to be amputated. Of course she doesn't deserve to live, observed the officer. But that's nature. Ah, my friend, nature has to be shaped and directed, or we'd all drown in prejudice, or there would not be a single great man. People say, duty, conscience. I won't say anything against duty or conscience, but how do we interrupt them? How do we interpret them? Wait, I'd like to ask you another question. Listen. No, you wait. Sorry. You know what? I think I'm dehydrated. I'm gonna drink this delicious bubble tea that I bought yesterday, which I don't know if it's okay to be laying around my car, because today was kind of a hotter day, right? So I don't know if it's like okay or if it's like bad. I think there is actually milk in here, but it wasn't refrigerated in the thing. Yeah, it contains milk, guys. Fuck. It contains milk, right? But it was like not refrigerated in stores. So we'll really have to. It smells fine. It smells a little weird. It doesn't taste bad, so I'm gonna drink it. And my hands are pretty shaky. I think I just have like low blood sugar or something, because I haven't really eaten anything today except for veggie straws and some rice cakes. Ricey rice cakes. We love rice cakes. Okay. No, you wait. I'd like to ask you a question. Listen. Well, here you go on talking, making speeches all over the place. But tell me, would you murder the old woman, or wouldn't you? Of course not. I am for justice, but it's none of my business. Well, if you want to know what I think if you won't do it yourself, there's no justice in it. Let's get back to the game. Raskolnikov was greatly agitated. Of course, this was all the most usual kind of intellectual discussion among young people, and he had heard it all before, on somewhat different themes. But why had it come up to pass that he overheard just this conversation, and just these ideas at a time when the same ideas were stirring in his own mind? And why now, with the germ of this idea fresh from the old woman's place, had he stumbled straight away onto a conversation about the same old woman? This coincidence would always seem strange to him. This trivial conversation overheard in a shabby restaurant had a very great influence on him as the affair developed further, as though it already had been kind of a prefiguration, a sign. On returning from the Haymarket, he flung himself on his couch and sat there a whole hour without moving. Meanwhile, it grew dark. He had no candles, and to light one would never have occurred to him anyway. Was he thinking anything then? He would never be able to remember. At last he felt feverish again, shivered, and became pleasantly aware that he could stretch out on the couch if he wanted to. Soon a strong leaden sleep seemed to press down upon him. I think I'm talking too quickly. I'll read quieter. Not quieter, slower. Soon he slept unusually long without dreaming. Natasha, who came into his room at 10 o'clock in the next morning, had trouble waking him. Number 15. She brought him a tea and bread. The tea was again twice boiled, and again she brought it in her own kettle. My, how he sleeps, she cried indignantly. He sleeps and sleeps and sleeps. He raised himself with an effort. His head ached. He rose to his feet, took a turn in his garret, and collapsed again on the couch. Going back to sleep, Natasha exclaimed, You sick, or what? He did not answer. Tea? Later he pronounced with an effort, closing his eyes again and turning to the wall. Nastasia stood over him. He must be really sick, she said, turned and went out. She came back with some soup. He lay as before, and the tea was untouched. Natasha felt hurt and began to shake him angrily. "Why don't you get up?" she cried, looking at him with disgust. He raised himself into a sitting position, but said nothing to her and stared at the floor. "Are you sick or not?" Natasha asked, but received no answer. "You ought to go out," she said, calming down, "and get a breath of fresh air. You gonna eat something?" "Later," he said weakly. "You can go." He dismissed her with a wave of his hand. She remained a little longer, looking at him with compassion, and went out. A few minutes later, he raised his eyes and looked for a long time at the tea and at the soup. He took the bread, picked up a spoon, and started to eat. He ate a little, without appetite, 3 or 4 spoonfuls, almost mechanically. His head ached less. Having eaten, he stretched again out on the couch. This time he could not sleep, and he lay there motionless, prone, face buried in his pillow. He kept daydreaming, and his daydreams were very strange. He fancied he was somewhere in Africa, in Egypt, somewhere on an oasis. A caravan was resting. The camels lay quietly. Palm trees grew in about a circle. Everyone was eating dinner. He was drinking water, though, straight from a flowing, murmuring spring, and it was so cool, and such marvelous blue water, marvelously cold, pouring over colored stones, and along such a clean, gold-flashing sand. Suddenly, he distinctly heard a clock strike. He gave a start, came to, raised his head, and glanced at the window, estimating the time. Suddenly, he leaped up as though someone had torn him from the couch. He went to the door on tiptoe, opened it quietly, and stood listening for sounds from below on the stairs. His heart pounded fearfully, but on the stairs all was quiet. Everyone was asleep. It seemed so wild and strange to him that he could sleep so oblivious for so long, that he had done nothing yet, and had prepared nothing. For all he knew, the clock might have struck 6, and sleep and torpor gave way to an unusual feverish and somewhat distraught activeness. Not much needed to be prepared, however. He strained his attention to think of everything and forget nothing. His heart was pounding so heavily that it became difficult for him to breathe. First, a sling had to be made and sewn into his overcoat. That would only take a minute. He dug into the laundry cramped under his pillow and searched out one of his tattered old unwashed shirts. He tore off a strip a couple of inches wide and a little over a foot long. He folded the strip in two, took off his broad, sturdy summer overcoat, made some kind of thick cloth, the only real overcoat he owned, and began to sew both ends of the strip to the inside just below the left armhole. DIY Queen! Oh my god, DIY Queen. Pinterest Queen. His hands trembled as he sewed, but he managed. Nothing was visible from the outside. I can't do this, guys. I can't fucking do this. Outside, when he put the coat on again, the needle and thread he had prepared a long time ago, and they had remained on the table wrapped in a sheet of paper. As for the sling, it was his own quite clever invention. The sling was designed for the axe. He could not possibly carry an axe in his hands through the streets. If it were hidden under a coat, a hand would still be needed to hold it there, and that might be noticed. Now all he had to do was insert the axe blade in the sling, and it would hang inside the coat under his arm safely all the way. From the left pocket of his coat, he could hang on to the axe handle so it wouldn't swing. Since the coat was very broad, a regular sack, no one would notice him supporting something with his hand through the pocket. The sling was also something he had thought of 2 weeks ago. That done, he thrust his finger into a small slit between his Turkish couch and the floor, fumbled about near the left corner, and withdrew the pledge he had prepared a long time ago and concealed there. This was not really a pledge at all, but just a smoothly planed piece of wood, the size and thickness of a silver cigarette case. He had found it accidentally in a workshop in the wing of a certain courtyard on one of his walks. To it he attached a thin, smooth iron strip, some sort of fragment he had also found on the street at about the same time. The iron was a little smaller than the wood. He bound them firmly together by tying them crisscross with a thread. Then he wrapped them carefully and neatly in a clean white paper and tied it so it would not be easy to unwrap. Then when the time came, the old woman's attention would be distracted. She would be fiddling with a knot, and so he would have a spare minute. The purpose of the iron strip was weight, so the old woman wouldn't guess immediately the thing was wood. He'd saved all of this under his couch until the time came. As he picked up the pledge, he suddenly heard a shout from somewhere in the courtyard. "It struck 6 long ago! Long ago! My God!" I have kind of a tummy ache when I drink this, but I'm thirsty, so... yeah, sorry guys. He rushed to the door, listened, seized his hat, and cautiously began climbing down his 13 steps, inaudibly like a cat. The most important thing was stealing the axe from the kitchen. He had decided long ago that it had to be done with an axe. He had a pocket knife too, but he could not really rely on the knife, especially not on his own strength. So, damn, this boy weak. So he decided conclusively on the axe. We may note, one peculiarity in passing with regard to all the resolute decisions he had already made in this matter. The more resolutely they were made, the more grotesque and the more absurd they instantly became in his eyes. In spite of all of his agonizing inner struggle, he could not and all this time believe for one moment in the carrying out of his plans. If he had actually managed at some point to examine everything and decide every last little detail conclusively, if doubt no longer remained, at just this point apparently he would have rejected it as absurd, monstrous, impossible, and refused to go through with it. There remained, however, a whole abyss of doubts and unresolved details. As to where he would get an axe was not much troubled. Nothing could be easier. As a matter of fact, Natasha frequently was out, especially in the evenings. She ran over to the neighbors or down the store, and she always left the door wide open. The landlady was always yelling at her for this. All one had to do was enter the kitchen quietly at the right time and take the axe, and then an hour later, when everything was done, enter and put it back. Still, there were doubts. Suppose he entered an hour later to put back the axe, but Natasha by chance returned. Then he would have to walk on past and wait till she went out again. But suppose she missed the axe in the meantime, started looking for it, and raised an outcry. That would mean suspicion, or at least the chance of suspicion. But these were all little things about which he had not started thinking, and indeed he had no time to think about them. He thought about the main thing and put off the little things until he could believe in it all. But that seemed completely unattainable, so it seemed to him, at any rate, he could not imagine, for instance, at the time would come when he would stop thinking, get up, and just go there, even sizing up to that project of his. His visit of not long ago, with the intention of looking the place over, had been, after all, only sizing up the project, had not been for real, but only more or less as follows. Suppose I have a look. Why go on just dreaming about it? And he had not been able to stick it out. He had run away, and he had been furious with himself. And yet it would seem that the whole analysis he had made, his attempt to find a moral solution to the problem, was complete. His casuistry, don't know this word, had been honored to a razor's edge, and he could no longer think of any objections. Yet, all told, he simply had no faith in himself, and he was looking everywhere, like a slave, for valid objections, groping his way, as though someone were forcing and pushing him. This last day, however, which had so unexpectedly decided everything at once, had caught him up almost automatically, as if by the hand, and pulled him along with unnatural power, blindly, irresistibly, and with no objections on his part. And he was caught, as if by the hem of his coat in the cog of a wheel, and being drawn in. At first, and it was a long time ago, one question had concerned him: why almost all his crimes were so easily detected and solved, and by why almost all criminals left such transparent clues behind. Little by little, he came to curious and complex conclusions. He believed that the most important reason had not so much to do with the practical impossibility of concealing a crime as with the criminal himself. While committing his crime, almost every criminal seemed to subject to a failure of judgment and of the will, which gave way to a phenomenal childless recklessness at the very moment when he needed a caution and judgment at the most. He became convinced that this failure of judgment and collapse of will take hold of man like a disease, develop gradually, and mount in the intensity of their position until just before the crime is committed. At the moment of the crime, and for some time thereafter, the process continues, depending on the individual. Then, like any disease, it passes. Whether the disease produced the crime, or whether crime, by its own innate peculiarities, was always accompanied by something like disease, he did not as yet feel that he was able to answer. Having reached such conclusions, he decided that he personally was immune. While he carried out his plan, his judgment and will would remain sound, for the simple reason that what he planned to do was not a crime. We omit the process by means of which he arrived at this last conclusion. As it is, we are a bit ahead of ourselves. We add merely that the practical, purely material difficulties involved play together an altogether secondary role in his mind. Only one needs to bring to bear all one's will and all one's judgment, and all difficulties can in due time be overcome, as one grows familiar with all the details of the matter, down to the least little item. But the matter had not yet begun. He particularly ceased to believe in his own most resolute decisions, and when the hour struck, everything turned out rather differently, somehow inadvertently and even unexpectedly. One trivial circumstance had him baffled even before he had descended the stairs. Reaching the landlady's kitchen wide open as usual, he gave it a cautious glance to make sure in advance the landlady was not there while Natasha was out, and if she was not, to make sure the door to her room was well shut and she would not be likely to stick her head out from there as he entered for the axe. To his astonishment, however, he suddenly saw that Natasha was not only at home this time, in the kitchen where she belonged, but that she was still busily at her job. She was taking laundry out of a basket and hanging it out on the line. Seeing him, she stopped hanging clothes, turned toward him, and watched him all the time he was walking past. He dropped his eyes and hurried through them. Noticed, though he... I'm going back to the chill's voice. As though he noticed nothing. But the matter was at an end. There was no axe. He was dumbfounded. What made me assume, he thought as he went out by the gate, what made me assume at this moment, inevitably, she would not be at home. Why was I so certain of that? He was crushed, somehow even humiliated. He wanted to laugh at himself with rage. A blind and brutal rage boiled up inside him. He stopped below the gates and thought things over. Going out for a stroll like this, just to keep up appearances, went against his grain. Returning to his room, even more so. What a chance I muffed for good, he muttered, standing there aimlessly below the gates, right across from the janitor's dark little room, which was open. In the janitor's little room, not more than 2 steps away, under a bench on the right, something that flashed his eye. He looked about. There was no one. He entered on tiptoe, went down 2 steps, and called for the janitor in a weak voice. So, he's not home. He's not far off, though. Must be in the yard, because his door is wide open. He went straight for the axe. It was an axe, and removed it from under the bench where it had been lying between 2 logs. On the spot, he attached it to the sling, thrust both hands into his pockets, and walked out of the janitor's room. No one saw him. He thought, if judgment fails, the devil takes a hand, and laughed strangely. This incident encouraged him amazingly. He walked calmly along, taking his time, not hurrying, in order to avoid suspicion. He hardly looked at passerby and tried not to glance at their faces at all, so he himself would remain unnoticed. Then he remembered his hat. My God, the day before yesterday I had the money, and I didn't get myself a cap, he swore. Out of the corner of his eyes, he glanced accidentally into a store window. Noticing by the wall clock that it was already 10 minutes past 7, he had to hurry. He would have to make a detour, approaching the house by its entrance on the far side. When he had imagined all this before, he had thought sometimes that he would be very much afraid. He was not much afraid now. He was not afraid at all. At the moment his thoughts were incidental and fleeting. Passing Yusupov Park, he thought of advantages of high fountains, and how much fresher they would make the public squares. When he's a civil engineer, baby girl! Gradually, he came to the conclusion that if the summer park could be extended to include all of the Mars Field and even united with Mikhailovsky Palace Gardens, the result would be practically and aesthetically a great improvement for the city. Then he wondered why it was all in the great cities, and not merely or exclusively because of necessity, but rather because of some special inclination. People settled and lived in those parts of the city where there were neither parks nor fountains, but dirt and stench and slime of all kinds. Then he remembered his own walks across the Haymarket, and for a moment he seemed to come to ridiculous. He thought, it's better not to think it at all. Those who are led off to execution, no doubt their thoughts fasten on anything, just like mine. It flashed into his head, but merely flashed, like lightning. He stifled to his thoughts as quickly as he could, but now he was already near. There was the house. There were the gates. Somewhere a clock struck once. Not half past already. Can't be. Probably fast. At the gates, luck was still with him. Not only that, but just then, as though on purpose, a huge load of hay was passing through the gates, hiding him completely, and as soon as the wagon emerged from the gateway into the yard, he slipped away to the right. As he walked beside the wagon, he heard several voices shouting and quarreling, but no one noticed him, and nobody passed him coming the other way. Many windows looking out on this huge square yard stood open at the moment. But he did not lift his head, for he had no strength. The stairs that led to this old woman's were close at hand. From the gates to the right, he was already on the stairs. Catching his breath, clutching all his pounding heart, groping for the axe and setting it straight, he began cautiously, quietly to climb the stairs, pausing every now and then to listen. But the stairs were empty. All of the doors were closed. He encountered no one. On the second floor, it is true, in one wide-open vacant apartment, painters were working, but they did not look up. He paused, reflected, and went on. It would be better, of course, if they weren't there, but there are 2 more floors over them. There was the 4th floor. There was the door. There was the apartment opposite. It was empty. The apartment directly below on the 3rd floor was, by all signs, empty too. The name card tacked on the door had been removed. He was out of breath. The thought flashed into his mind. Should I leave? He provided himself with no answer, however, and began to listen at the old woman's apartment. Dead silence. Then he listened again at the stairs, for a long time intently. Then he looked about for the last time, once again set straight, and tested the axe in his sling. Maybe I'm too pale, he thought. Maybe I look too nervous. She's very suspicious. Maybe I should wait a while till my heart stops pounding. But his heart would not stop pounding. As though on purpose, it started pounding harder and harder and harder. He couldn't stand it. Slowly he reached his hand to the bell and rang. In half a minute he rang again, louder. No answer, no point, just ringing. In fact, it was not a good idea. The old woman was at home all right, but she was alone and suspicious. He knew some of her habits. He put his ear up against the door again. Either his senses has grown especially keen, and that was unlikely, or it could be heard quite distinctly. There was a cautious rustle at the hand of the doorknob, and something like the swish of a dress right near the door. Someone was standing silently at the threshold, and exactly as he was doing on the outside, was lurking and listening within. Also, it would seem, with an ear to the door. He stirred and shuffled on purpose, muttering aloud, so as not to give the impression that he was lying in wait. He rang a 3rd time, calmly with authority, without any bustle of impatience. In later recollection... Bro, you got me like Golden Freddy. In later recollections, this moment was engraved sharply and clearly and forever. He could not understand from what source he had drawn so much cunning, especially since his mind went blank for moments at a time, and he had almost no sense of his body. A moment later, he could hear the latch being removed. Okay, that was that. And guys, since I haven't really eaten a lot today, we're gonna treat ourselves to y'all getting a read with Aristide and an eat with Pete, so be grateful, y'all. We're getting some fruit roll-up actions, y'all. SpongeBob meme edition, you guys. That's so crazy. Yeah, actually, I do have a strikingly deep voice. It's just natural, though. Like, I'm not gonna fake that shit. I put my voice in one of those, like, AI generator things. It's crazy. It doesn't really sound like me, right? Because, like, I feel like I have a lot of variation in my voice when I talk, just period. But that was crazy. I was like, what is that? Girl, what is that? Okay, anyway. We're gonna put a tattoo on our tongue. Because, like, these are so crazy, you guys. I, like, never really ate fruit roll-ups as a kid because my parents were, like, health nuts. Like, my mom was such a big health nut. Oh my god, I get a Sandy Cheeks tattoo. Wait, give me that freaking Sandy Cheeks Wait, should I get this? There's a Sandy one, and then there's, like, a SpongeBob one. Or I think this is Squidward. My name is Squidward. That's what he sounds like, bro. I'm gonna do the Sandy Cheeks one. Oh my god, this is so exciting, you guys. It's kind of stuck to the plastic because it's been in a hot car. Okay, you guys. And you put it on your tongue. Don't look. It didn't work! Last time I did this, it worked pretty well. But it's also because, like, the thing wasn't melted. That's so upsetting. Time to eat my fruit roll. Which, by the way, if we had to make a tier list, if we had to make a definitive tier list, right? I would say fruit roll-ups. Fruit roll-ups are S tier, triple S tier, amazing. Gushers also S tier. But weirdly enough, I don't like fruit by the foot. I don't like it because it's just too much, right? Like, fruit ropes are small. They're very sour. But, like, it's not an overwhelming amount of, like, gumminess or what. There's not an overwhelming amount of it. But fruit by the foot, I don't know if you're supposed to eat the whole thing in one sitting. I think you are. It's just so overwhelming because there's so much of it, right? And it's also not as, like, you know, jam-packed with sweetness as, you know, for a fruit roll or a gusher. I also gained, I don't know how this happened. I gained 20 pounds. I hope you don't see it in my face, but I did. It's weird, actually, because last summer, I lost 10 pounds, and then, so I was at, like 90 or something like that. And now I'm sitting at, like, 115, bro. It's brutal out here. It's so brutal. The freshman 15 is real, even though I'm technically a junior now. Which is also crazy. So yeah, end of the line. I am not a dude. So yeah, I'm not a dude, but I can understand where y'all get that from. And I'm honestly not, I'm shook, but I'm, like, not offended. You know, I'm, like, shook because I thought I, like, presented, like, in a feminine way, but I get where it comes from because, like, I don't have a very, like, feminine face. I have a very, it's messed up because I have certain features of my face are very angular, where other features of my face are, like, very, like, fat and soft. So it's like there's a lot to work with right here, and by a lot to work with, I mean there's absolutely nothing to work with, and I need help. But yeah. And my voice, I have like, just naturally, I have, like, a nasally, like, I sound like the girl from Moral Oral, like Joe's sister. I forgot her name. I sound like Joe's sister. Hello, this is what's the last name? It's like, it's not this, I don't know, I haven't watched Moral Oral, I've only seen clips. Hello, this is XYZ speaking, welcome. I don't really have a phone voice. Actually, no, this is my phone voice. I go, hi, this is Chat with Matt, how can I help you? No, I go, hi, this is Chat with Matt, how can I help you? I'm gonna try to do the customer service voice. Hi, how you doing? Nah, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. And then I can also do, like, the anime girl voice, but it just doesn't work, right? Because I have a very nasally voice, and I talk from my nose, right? I talk from my nose, and this is the Redditor voice. This is the voice that I use when I go on Reddit. Okay, I love using Reddit, guys. I love using Reddit. But yeah, this is my anime girl voice, and, like, it doesn't really sound like an anime girl voice, because, that's just not how my voice projects for whatever reason, and maybe I was given the wrong vocal cords, but weirdly enough, I like doing the anime girl voice. Not because it even sounds like an anime girl, it just sounds funny, right? It just sounds like, I don't even know what. I would love to be a voice actor one day, which is why I'm doing like the Read with Aristide things, because I do actually like reading. Even though I don't like the sound of my own voice, I do like reading and I like talking. I never shut up. Like as a kid, I wasn't nonverbal, but I was pretty quiet. Like I didn't talk that much. So I'm making up for all those years by not shutting up. And I talk a lot. So anyway, guys, you know, this is freaking Crime and Punishment. Will he go through with the murder? We don't know yet. We don't know. Will his plans be foiled? Will the painters come running up and say, "Oh, I heard that"? Will Razumikin come to his door and say, "Raskolnikov, I have loved you ever since we met in university"? Will Marmeladov come up and go, "Hey, y'all, I want you to marry my 15-year-old daughter because I think you cute, girlfriend." I forgot how old Sonia is. Sonia is like 19, I think. I don't know. I think all the characters are legal, is what I'm hoping. So, yeah, guys. Expect Chapter 7 soon. Bam, bam, bam.